Hello and welcome to the Dinosaw for week 36. Another 7 curious, interesting things I saw last week. Apologies for the missing 2 dinosaurs, but I was on holiday, so sorry about that. But as ever, let's crack on. So the first one is actually the French government using AI and satellite images in conjunction with Capgemini and Google to spot undeclared swimming pools. Now, the reason this is important is if you have an undeclared swimming pool, it basically means you need to pay more tax on your property. So they caught over 20,000 undeclared swimming pools in France so far, and that amassed 10 million euros of extra revenue that government didn't have before. So that's quite an interesting use of technology. The reason this caught my eye is this is exactly something that the insurance industry were looking at a couple of years ago, was involved in to try and find out whether people were actually declaring their house was made out of the right thing, that sort of thing. So there you go. So it's good to see it being used. If you've been caught, it's probably not so great. Also, lots of people were slightly perturbed because obviously it was using Google, and depending on where you are and what you think of their tax status, you might need to think that they might pay more tax, and if they're catching people who aren't paying tax, then there's a bit of an issue there. But anyway, there you go. This is SANAS, another slightly controversial thing. So SANAS is a technology that sits in front of call center staff. So if you call your call center staff and you hear their voice, now some people, if they hear certain accents, don't like that, and they think, why am I being sent around the world, etc., etc., or even local. So if you hear somebody from the north and you're from the south, or vice versa, people react to that. So what SANAS does is it allows you to essentially mask the accent of your operators and your agents. So they still say the same stuff, they still say it with the same intonation, it changes the accent live. Now obviously this is quite controversial as well, because quite frankly it could also be seen as whitewashing. So people want to hear Western white voices and trust them more. So quite controversial. So I thought that was quite interesting also just because of that as well. This is a smart toilet. This is Throne. Now I had a thing years and years ago that during the millennium, instead of building the Millennium Dome, we should have actually put all that money to putting more public toilets in every town in the UK. However, they didn't listen to me, so fair enough. But this is Throne. This is a US startup. As you see here, it is a toilet cubicle that you need to download an app for. So again, slightly controversial because not everybody has an app, but probably the people who need public toilets the most probably don't have access to the technology, etc., etc. However, what this does is if you do have the app, you log into it. It uses recycled water, it uses solar power, etc. All good. But what I thought was most interesting is it actually gives you, or you have a Throne score. Now your Throne score is given to you by other people, a little bit like Uber. So once you've been to a toilet, it knows you've been there and it knows how long you've been in there. It's all anonymized apparently. But then what it does is the next person to turn up will then say, actually this looks great. The last person here must have left it in a great state, and that actually reflects on your score as well. So there you go. So that's Throne. I thought it was interesting only because of really that Throne score. There you go. This is a great story. So this was actually, I saw this on one of the sort of the hacker blogs, and this was all about people hacking a satellite. Now, it sort of got me into a rabbit hole of, well, how is this even possible? So lots of satellites actually reach the end of their life. So this is the Anik F1. There have been lots of Anik satellites, all the way from A all the way up to I don't know what. But this one, for instance, had a 15-year lifespan. So it was launched in 2000. So it's way over its planned life cycle, and therefore all of those they basically get thrown out into satellite graveyard. Not quite sure what happens. They either fall to Earth or they just get put out somewhere where they're not going to bother anything else. And that's all the mess that's in the sky right now. However, this one had been decommissioned, was soon to be decommissioned, hadn't actually been put out into that graveyard yet. So some hackers decided this would be quite interesting. How difficult can it really be to control a satellite? So they applied for a license. They got the license. They got access to the upload facility, which is essentially a shed full of stuff, which allows you to speak to the satellite. And that's exactly what they did. So what can you actually do with a hijacked satellite? Well, not much apparently, but actually it's quite cool if you're into that sort of thing. Really what it does is it just bounces down back to Earth whatever you throw back up to it. So what they were doing is they were at a conference and they were actually allowing the conference to be live streamed via the satellite, and also they were just allowing people just to connect to the satellite and basically say stuff to it, and it would broadcast that to the world, or at least to Northern Europe. So so that was quite interesting. If you do own any satellites and you haven't secured it just before it goes off to be decommissioned, you may want to do that now. This is Delta, and this is actually in Detroit Airport. So I heard about this at CES and been following these guys for a while. This is Misapplied Sciences, only because of their interesting screens. They don't really tell you how they use it, but it's pretty much lenticular screens. If you don't know what those are, it's those kind of, remember those rulers you used to get at school that if you move them then the dinosaur would animate on them? That's a lenticular screen. So it uses lots of lenses to sort of direct light sideways into strips. So anyway, what is this? So what you do is you rock up with your boarding pass. You would show, this is only for people who actually want to do it. It doesn't do it for everybody. So you show your boarding pass. It will then track you from that point on. There was a little sort of camera and LiDAR scanners above you. It would track you around, and therefore it would only show you the flight information for your flight on the screen. So if you move sideways, then, or if you essentially were standing next to you, you wouldn't be able to see your details. And as you can see in a little demo here, he actually goes behind somebody else. So it's like hello Jordan, and then it's hello Nicholas. So Nicholas is the person next to him who is now seeing Nicholas's details. So it's quite interesting. They're looking really for a use for these lenticular screens. They've been around for years and years and years. It's how the old 3D TVs used to work. As I say, animated rulers, 3D movies, it's the whole thing. So just a really interesting use of technology. Yeah. If you're in the out-of-home world, quite interesting. This is actually started from a report from the head of Link, which is the UK cash machine service, and there are many. Essentially saying, look, we've got some figures in. We're actually seeing a 20% decline in the use of cash, or at least cash machines, since the pandemic, and also just 1 in 20 transactions are now in cash these days, and it is falling as well, so it's going away. I reported a couple of years ago that Scandinavia was going to be the first sort of territory that would go cash free. So it seems like actually the pandemic has accelerated everything. Now this does have knock-on effects for rural communities, or those who don't, or the unbanked, for instance, those who don't have access to banking. So that's quite interesting, just something to follow. If you are a company that takes only digital payments, then it's something you might need to think about is, well, what happens when people who don't have access to cash can't pay you? So there you go. And also in America, there are certain states that are actually now demanding that all outlets, all shops have to take cash, because there was a sort of, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, there was lots of sort of local laws were passed. So it's something that's happening. Obviously, the head of Link is now sort of warning that we've probably only got between 5 and 10 years left to do something about this, either to go one way or the other to help people out. There you go. And finally, so this is really interesting. So what you're seeing here is in the middle, it was a TikTok video, and this is actually Kurt Skeleton, or Skelton, and it was actually this lady that you can see who's saying, like, actually this person you've been following called Skelton is not actually a real thing at all. She created it using AI, and she searched for sort of Ed Sheeran, and she sort of mixed it with Matt Smith, and then did lots of LiDAR scanning, so she could then create a body mapping of it, and then she would then just puppet it through lots of public systems that you can use online. And everybody was like, this is really interesting. I thought I was watching one person and I've been hoodwinked into another. And actually what there was a bit of a double hoodwink going on, because it was actually Kurt, who was a special effects artist, who created the video to make himself look like an AI. So everybody got confused about it. Lots and lots of media outlets reported that this was actually the original woman there, pretending to be an AI man, and therefore, what can we believe anymore on the internet? And obviously the reality was even one step further than that, so I thought that was really interesting. So as we say in crypto, do your own research, and hopefully you won't fall for those again. There you go. Hopefully that was interesting. Hopefully it was useful. I'm back to 1 a week, so I will see you next week.